What is environmental justice? Why is it important? And what does it mean to you as someone in the environmental field? I'm Dennis Sahaki. These are some fundamental questions facing us today. Here are three experts to help us address them.
به نظر من عدالت در امور پروژه‌های محیط زیست شامل این است که تمام مردم و گروه‌هایی که در حامی این محیط‌ها زندگی می‌کنند باید از نتایج خوب این پروژه‌ها تقریباً به سهم مساوی بهره‌مند شوند و لا عدالت در این امور رعایت نشده است.
El problema de justicia ambiental tiene que ver con conceptos básicos de la democracia norteamericana. En los Estados Unidos nos parece inaceptable que personas por su raza o por su salario tengan que enfrentarse a más riesgos de enfermarse que otras personas dependiendo en dónde vivan.
My agency views itself as a cross-functional change agent implementing increasingly complex benchmarking paradigms of environmental justice. The synergy among NEPA, CERCLA, FLPMA, and RCRA creates a cost-effective TQM initiative utilizing public-private preventative approaches to the equitable distribution of positive and negative externalities regarding human resource-related values.
If you're like me, you probably understood little of what you just heard. In fact, you may have felt a bit frustrated, angry, or excluded. This is how other people may feel when they try to understand and participate in your projects and your programs. So what is environmental justice? Environmental justice is achieved when everyone, regardless of race, culture, or income, enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards and equal access to a healthy environment in which to live, work, and play. Keeping in mind this definition of environmental justice, we'd like to examine some misconceptions surrounding this issue.
Low-income and minority communities have chosen to live near environmentally degraded or hazardous areas. Therefore, it's their problem, not ours.
This view ignores that our laws are written to protect all of our citizens. Also, these so-called choices are often predetermined by economic realities.
Environmental justice is a new issue.
Environmental justice links traditional social and constitutional issues with the environment. Existing laws, such as the National Environmental Policy Act and the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, support environmental justice in their public participation and in their implementation.
Environmental justice is more work and will slow me and my project down.
If properly done, including minority and low-income communities can make your job easier, your project more successful, and end up saving you both time and money.
Environmental justice is something you do for others.
No, environmental justice is something you create with all parties. As Jane Addams said, the good we secure for ourselves is precarious and uncertain until it is secured for all of us and incorporated into our common life. It is important that we not waste our time pointing fingers at past actions or decisions. Instead, let's use our understanding of the past and our existing resources to create solutions. So let's start from the beginning. Sue, would you give us some background on the origins of the environmental justice movement?
Well, the environmental justice movement came about as communities of color and low-income communities began to realize that their neighborhoods were being chosen disproportionately for the siting of environmentally undesirable facilities. These communities felt excluded from the siting decisions and the operational decisions relating to these facilities. In addition, they had health and safety concerns that they felt weren't being taken seriously. And finally, they began to feel that environmental health and safety laws were being unevenly applied and enforced.
What is the basis for these concerns?
Well, these concerns are very well documented. We know, for example, that 3 out of 4 hazardous waste facilities in this country are sited in low-income communities and communities of color. Now, you pair that information with the fact that we have 8 million inner-city kids suffering from lead poisoning. Is there a connection? Well, you can bet that many people in these communities believe that there is. In rural areas, we have 2 million tons of radioactive uranium waste stored on tribal lands. In addition, we know that Navajo teenagers suffer from reproductive cancer at 17 times the national average. Now, in terms of enforcement, we've seen that penalties for hazardous waste violations in white communities are up to 500% higher than they are in communities of color. Now, of course, the main basis for these concerns is the experience of the people in these communities, which leads them to believe that their health and safety are at risk from environmental conditions in their neighborhoods.
Is environmental justice really a new issue?
No, our awareness of environmental justice has been developing since we began environmental protection in the 1970s. In fact, let me give you a brief historical perspective. In 1971, the Council on Environmental Quality's annual report identified the link between race, income, and environmental risk in urban areas. 1982, there was a demonstration by African Americans in Warren County, North Carolina, protesting the disposal of contaminated soil in their neighborhood. 1983, a U.S. Government Accounting Office report confirmed a siting bias toward low-income and minority communities in the southeastern U.S. 1987, a United Church of Christ-sponsored study found the same siting patterns existed throughout the U.S. 1991, grassroots groups at the first National People of Color Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C. adopted fundamental environmental justice principles and strategies. 1992, the Environmental Protection Agency established an Office of Environmental Justice. 1994, President Clinton signed the Executive Order on Environmental Justice. In addition, we're starting to see increased awareness of environmental justice by state and local governments and the private sector. And I hope that means we're moving toward a time when environmental justice will be incorporated into our day-to-day decisions.
Eduardo, as we've seen, there have been a lot of recent changes, such as the President's Environmental Justice Executive Order of 1994. How will this executive order affect how we do business?
Well, under the executive order, agencies must make environmental justice part of their mission. Right now, we're still not sure how far the executive order is going to change the way we do business. But for example, under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, the scope of public participation has been expanded.
Munir, tell us some specifics about the executive order.
Well, under the executive order, federal agencies must make sure that their activities do not exclude anyone from participation, deny the benefits of those activities to any person, or to subject any person to discrimination. In order to do this, agencies must first identify and collect demographic information about the area surrounding their activities. You need to include populations you've identified in your decision making, and you also need to compile information about the health effects of your activities, including information on subsistence consumption of fish and wildlife.
How will the executive order be implemented?
The executive order will be implemented through agency strategies, which will direct federal employees into incorporating environmental justice into everything that they do. Currently, there are mechanisms like the National Environmental Policy Act and land use plans. For example, if we take an action which will have an effect on a traditional ceremony of a Native American tribe, we must consider such an impact under the executive order and NEPA.
How does the executive order relate to existing civil rights laws?
The executive order reaffirms our commitment to the equal protection guarantees of the Constitution. It merely restates Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which requires that no person shall be excluded from participation in, denied the benefits of, or subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance.
What should we keep in mind when considering environmental justice?
Environmental justice is a question of basic fairness. We need to ask ourselves if our actions are having different impacts on different communities.
Don't forget, environmental justice isn't about agencies, it's not about environmental groups, it's about communities taking control of the environmental problems and the environmental opportunities in their lives. So identify these communities and include them in your decision making.
Gene, tell us how the National Environmental Policy Act can be an important tool for environmental justice.
Well, first off, I should say that I think that the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, is one of the most insightful and progressive pieces of legislation that Congress has ever passed. Now, the real purpose of NEPA is to promote better public decision-making. And even though it applies only to federal actions, it's really about people and their relationship to the environment and to each other. And one of the principles that it was always meant to address is that of environmental justice. As Section 101 of NEPA states, Congress recognizes that all Americans should enjoy a healthful environment and that each person has a responsibility to contribute to the preservation and enhancement of the environment.
How do you make the process available to all Americans?
Well, the environmental assessment and decision-making process needs to be both open and inclusive. In order to do that, you should probably remember a few points. First, know your publics. Don't assume that all members of a community or all communities are the same. Very often their individual values and concerns are quite different, and you need to be aware of those in order to make the process work for everyone. You need to educate people about the opportunities and responsibilities they have in the NEPA process. Often those responsibilities and opportunities vary from project to project and are not often clear from the legislation. You need to provide outreach during all phases of the process, not just during scoping, to make sure that there is adequate public involvement and disclosure during the process. You need to respond substantively to the community's concerns. Just as each community is different, often their concerns are very different. And all during the process, they need to feel that their concerns are being spoken to adequately. Remember that shared knowledge is shared power. Now, I know that sounds trite, but it really is very important to remember. Often communities have great concerns that when their concerns are pitted against scientific opinion, that their values and their concerns will be overlooked. So it's very important to make sure that the decision is being made from a shared database. Lastly, be flexible. It's very important to realize that since all these communities and projects are very different, that the roles that agencies may have to play and the way that information may have to be delivered is going to be different.
Tell us more about scoping.
Well, the Council on Environmental Quality, which oversees NEPA, has provided us with scoping guidance which is very relevant to the environmental justice issue, such as scoping is a process, not an event or a meeting. Design the scoping process for each project and the communities affected. The key is to be flexible. People usually respond positively when they are treated as partners. This opportunity carries with it a new responsibility. As you can see, NEPA can be a powerful tool to include low-income and minority communities in the decision-making process.
Patrick, tell us what low-income and minority communities are looking for in public involvement.
They're looking for several things. First off, they're looking for access to decision makers and early and frequent access to the decision-making process. They're looking for community and tribal-based solutions to environmental problems. That includes the health and protection of the children and families in their communities. They're also looking to us to help them look at big picture problems in their communities and not break their communities up into small segments or components. And last, and I think most importantly, they're looking for open and honest communication.
How can we mitigate our impacts on communities?
There are several things that we can do to mitigate our impacts. We can do self-examinations of what we do and how we do it, and specifically how that affects low-income and minority communities. We can provide easy access points to communities that want to come in and utilize our expertise and our information. We can streamline our internal processes so that they're easy and user-friendly for residents and communities that are affected. We can do outreach to work with communities on projects that build goodwill and strong support. We can also bring interested parties together to build strong coalitions and develop good, sound solutions.
What can one person do to further environmental justice?
The key is being proactive. You are the best ambassador for your agency. All communities respond very positively to being treated with respect and dignity. Any strong, lasting relationship begins with small steps.
Larry, tell us about the role of environmental justice in science.
Well, the average citizen struggles with all of the sciences that exist today and the understanding of them. Yet we're asking them to rely on science to solve the problems that face their community today. There may be a perception in that community that the old science may have contributed to the problem that they now face. We now must instill mutual trust and understanding of that science in solving the problem.
What are some tools we can use to help us apply environmental justice to land use decisions?
Well, we have available aerial photography, which goes back probably 60 or 70 years. And also we have the availability now of satellite technology and information, which gives us an historical context of how our community has evolved over many years. We also have historical data, that information that's available through research, through local newspapers, through any material that's archived, which will give us insight into the community, as well as local periodicals and newsletters that may exist within that community. The last is geographic information systems, GIS as we commonly know it as. This information provides us with a high-tech method of looking at the community. As you can see by the map we have in front of us here, we have a metropolitan Denver which shows in the green and green shaded areas the minority and low-income communities that exist. The orange dots represent the toxic release inventory sites that exist within those communities. And as you can see, there is a large concentration of them within those specific green and green shaded areas. Thus, we have an understanding of why the community may have large-scale concerns regarding them. The second site map that I'm showing you here, it's the Sharon Steel Midvale tailing site located in Salt Lake City, Utah. Here you see where a specific site, and they're looking at buffer zones and the impact it will have on the community. But the thing that I want to stress is when you're seeking alternative sites, this kind of technology allows you to explore alternative sites and again consider the ramifications it will have on the community.
What if you don't have these high-tech tools available?
Then you take that high technology and you make it low-tech. You can walk inside a community and you can talk with its citizens and you can get insight into today's information. The GIS system is based on census data, which is dated and may not reflect what is happening right now. You can talk to the elders of the community. They are a source of good living community history, and they may give you insights or clarification on information that you really need in making your decisions. You can engage in some environmental education so that the youth can be a source of educating their parents. You can identify long-standing trusted people in the community, and you can engage them to understand the information and help you be a tool for effective communication.
How do you establish credibility?
Credibility happens when all sides treat each other with mutual respect and have a common understanding of the problems and issues that they face. While everyone may not agree with the decision that will finally have to be made, if they come through a seasoned and reasonable approach, credibility will be maintained.
Lorraine, would you share some of your insights about how to work successfully with minority and low-income communities?
First, it's important to remember that the people that live and work in these communities are experts in their own right. They have much to share. Secondly, developing partnerships is important. Partnerships that are based on mutual respect, a willingness to learn, and shared decision-making. We do share a common goal. If we can work together as allies, we can achieve that goal to the benefit of all of the people involved.
What are some specific community involvement approaches that you've found helpful?
We've worked on 3 Superfund sites. What we do is we take the information that's available, we translate it into community language, and then we hold public meetings where people, residents, can come and hear the information so that they can understand what's going on. We also create opportunities for people to be involved in the decision making. Tactics we've used include door knocking, translating information into Spanish, offering interpreters at public meetings and babysitting at public meetings, and asking for extended public comment periods so that people have time to learn, understand, and reflect upon the information they've been given. One important tactic has also been to outreach to allies, such as the Board of Education or the Housing Authority, who also have an interest in the site.
It seems like a lot of work. What are the benefits of these approaches?
It is a lot of work. It's an inherent part of the process. But when people work together as allies, as partners, the work can be shared, the responsibility can be shared, conflict can be avoided, the process can move more quickly, and we can have an outcome that is acceptable to all of the parties involved.
We've talked about environmental justice in the United States. What about environmental justice relative to international issues?
Well, we need to bring the same awareness and sensitivity that we are trying to apply to environmental justice issues in the United States to our overseas activities and relationships as well. We are required to do this by the Executive Order on Environmental Effects Abroad of Major Federal Actions, which directs information exchange among U.S. agencies and other nations, and that federal agencies shall consider the environmental consequences of their actions if global commons, such as Antarctica, are affected, or critical global resources, such as the rainforest, are affected, or they involve toxic or radioactive emissions beyond limits allowed by U.S. law.
Beside the executive order, do we have other international obligations?
Well, yes. A 1993 Environmental Defense Fund versus the National Science Foundation NEPA court decision did identify additional international obligations. We have additional responsibilities under our continental agreements, such as the Trans-Boundary Waters Treaty with Canada and the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Other obligations concern more global issues like biodiversity, acid rain, global climate change, and endangered species. Now, based on these laws and treaties, we need to apply the same standard for creating environmental justice in our interactions with the rest of the world as we are trying to apply here in the United States.
There has been and continues to be unequal environmental protection and lack of access to the decision-making process. However, we can change this by doing the following: increasing our awareness, involving and listening to all affected communities in every stage of a project or program, using common sense approaches as well as state-of-the-art technology, and being creative and open to new perspectives and ideas. Now, we have the opportunity, knowledge, and resources to make environmental justice come alive. Working together, we can heal, protect, and properly manage the environment for all of us.